Walking into our family's sprawling suburban home that Thanksgiving evening, I could feel something was off. Dad kept checking his phone every 5 minutes, whispering to Mom in the kitchen with this weird, excited energy I'd never seen before. Little did I know, the bombshell he was about to drop at dinner would shatter everything I thought I knew about my place in our family, but not in the way he expected. If you've ever felt like the forgotten middle child in your own family business, drop a comment below and subscribe to see how this Thanksgiving dinner turned into the most shocking family meeting of my life. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm 31 years old. For 3 generations, the Martinez family has owned Coastal Construction, one of the biggest residential building companies in our Florida county. My grandfather started it in 1965 with a beat-up pickup truck and a dream. By the time my father, Roberto Martinez, took over in 1995, we were building custom homes for celebrities and politicians throughout South Florida. Growing up, our family vacations weren't to Disney World like other kids. We drove around construction sites while Dad pointed out Martinez quality in every beam and foundation. The company wasn't just our business, it was our identity. Every family barbecue, every holiday gathering, every Sunday dinner somehow turned into a celebration of Martinez Construction's success. Our house reflected that success. 6 bedrooms, a pool overlooking the Intercoastal, and a 3-car garage filled with Dad's collection of vintage muscle cars. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American success story. Dad loved telling anyone who'd listen how he'd grown the company from a small family operation to a $50 million empire with over 200 employees. But there was always this tension simmering beneath the surface. See, there were 3 Martinez kids, and Dad had very different expectations for each of us. My older brother Carlos was the golden child, destined to inherit the throne. My younger sister, Isabel, a daddy's little princess who could do no wrong. And then there was me, Sarah, stuck in the middle, trying to prove I belonged in a business that had been built by men, run by men, and meant to stay that way. I spent my childhood on construction sites, learning to read blueprints before I could properly read chapter books. I knew the difference between load-bearing walls and partition walls by age 10. I could spot shoddy electrical work from across a job site by 15. But somehow, despite having a business degree and 5 years of experience working my way up from the bottom, I was still treated like I was playing dress-up in the family business. That particular Thanksgiving, as I pulled into the circular driveway behind Carlos's brand new BMW and Isabella's Instagram-worthy Range Rover, I had no idea that everything was about to change. The warm Florida evening felt different somehow, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle with anticipation. Dad answered the door himself, which was unusual. Mom typically handled the social aspects while he stayed focused on business calls, even on holidays. But there he was, grinning wider than I'd seen in months, practically vibrating with excitement. "Sarah Mija," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Perfect timing. We have a lot to discuss tonight. Let me paint you a picture of the Martinez family hierarchy because understanding our dynamics is crucial to what happened next." At the top sat Roberto Martinez, my father, 62 years old, and every inch the successful businessman. He wore his authority like his expensive suits, perfectly fitted and impossible to ignore. Dad had this way of commanding every room he entered, speaking in decisive statements rather than suggestions. He'd built his reputation on being tough but fair, the kind of boss who demanded excellence and usually got it. But when it came to his children, fairness somehow got lost in translation. Carlos, my older brother at 35, was the undisputed heir apparent. 6'2", with Dad's broad shoulders and confident smile, he'd been handed a vice president title the day after graduating from college. Carlos had this natural charisma that made clients trust him instantly, even when his knowledge of actual construction was embarrassingly shallow. He could schmooze with investors over golf, but ask him about building codes or material costs, and he'd quickly change the subject to his latest boat purchase or vacation in the Bahamas. The truth was, Carlos coasted on the Martinez name and Dad's reputation. While I was in the office at 7 a.m. reviewing contracts and managing project timelines, Carlos would stroll in around 10, spend an hour at his desk, then disappear for client meetings that usually involved expensive restaurants and even more expensive entertainment. But Dad saw what he wanted to see, his firstborn son, tall and handsome, playing the role of successful executive. Isabella, my baby sister at 28, had carved out her special place in Dad's heart. Where Carlos was the business heir, Isabella was the emotional favorite. She'd leveraged our family's success into a lifestyle brand on social media, with over 200,000 followers who loved her perfectly curated glimpses into Florida luxury living. Her Instagram was filled with photos of our construction projects, always captioned with things like "another Martinez masterpiece" or "grateful to be part of this legacy." Isabella was brilliant at marketing and had helped modernize our company's image, but she treated the actual business side like it was beneath her. She'd show up for ribbon cuttings and groundbreaking ceremonies, pose for photos with important clients, then disappear back to her world of influencer events and brand partnerships. Dad adored her for bringing glamour to our blue-collar business, even though her contributions were mostly decorative. And then there was me, Sarah, the middle child in every sense of the word. I had Dad's work ethic and grandpa's eye for detail, but somehow I was always invisible in family business discussions. Despite having my MBA and 5 years of hands-on experience managing our residential division, I was still stuck in middle management while Carlos made strategic decisions he didn't understand, and Isabella got credit for marketing campaigns I actually created. My mother, Carmen, played the role of supportive wife and peacekeeper. She'd immigrated from Colombia with Dad when they were young, and she understood the value of hard work and sacrifice. But she also believed in traditional family roles. When I'd complain about being overlooked, she'd pat my hand and say, "Mija, your time will come. Be patient with your father." The family meetings were the worst part. Every month, Dad would gather us in his home office to discuss company performance and upcoming projects. Carlos would dominate the conversation with grand visions he couldn't execute. Isabella would contribute social media metrics and engagement rates. And I'd sit there with actual performance reports, cost analyses, and operational improvements that somehow never made it into the discussion. I remember one meeting where I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation about expanding into sustainable building practices, complete with market research and projected profits. Dad listened for about 5 minutes before cutting me off. "That's very thorough, Sarah, but let's focus on practical matters. Carlos, what's your take on the Henderson development?" It was like watching someone else get credit for your homework over and over again. The breaking point had been building for months, but I had no idea that this Thanksgiving would be the moment everything finally exploded. The Martinez family Thanksgiving had always been a production. Mom spent days preparing traditional Colombian dishes alongside classic American sides, transforming our formal dining room into something worthy of a magazine spread. The mahogany table gleamed under our crystal chandelier, set with the good china that only emerged for special occasions. Fresh flowers from Mom's garden created an elaborate centerpiece, flanked by candles that cast everything in warm, golden light. But this year felt different from the moment I walked through the door. Dad was pacing around the living room, which was completely out of character. He usually planted himself in his leather recliner with a whiskey and the business section of the Miami Herald, holding court while the rest of us buzzed around him. Instead, he kept checking his phone, disappearing into his office for mysterious calls, then returning with this barely contained excitement that was making everyone nervous. "Roberto, sit down." Mom called from the kitchen, but there was tension in her voice, too. "You're making me dizzy with all that walking around." Carlos had arrived early with his latest girlfriend, a 25-year-old fitness instructor named Ashel, EY, who kept taking selfies in front of our expensive artwork. He seemed oblivious to the weird energy, too busy showing off our family's wealth to notice Dad's strange behavior. "This is the original Fernandez painting," Carlos explained to Ashley, gesturing toward a piece that had cost more than most people's cars. "My father has impeccable taste in art. It comes with business success, you know." Isabella burst through the front door like she was making a red carpet entrance, already filming for her Instagram stories. "Martinez family Thanksgiving, take one," she announced to her phone, panning across our decorated living room. Nothing says gratitude like family, tradition, and… She paused for dramatic effect. Big announcements.
Wait.
Big announcements? I caught her eye, but she just winked and kept recording. Mom emerged from the kitchen wearing her best dress and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She started fussing over Ashley, offering drinks and appetizers, but I noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she arranged the cheese platter. Mrs. Martinez, your home is gorgeous, Ashley gushed. Carlos told me about the business, but seeing all this… She gestured vaguely at our obvious wealth. It must be amazing to have such a successful family enterprise. Dad finally stopped pacing and fixed his attention on Ashley. Success doesn't happen by accident, he said, his chest puffing with familiar pride. 3 generations of Martinez men have built something special. Something lasting. I felt the familiar sting of exclusion in his phrasing. 3 generations of Martinez men. As if I hadn't spent the last 5 years proving my worth, hadn't grown our residential division's profits by 30%, hadn't earned my place at the table through actual work instead of birthright. Sarah's been working hard lately, Mom interjected, and I was grateful for the acknowledgement even though it felt like an afterthought. We're all proud of Sarah, Dad said with that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. She's very dedicated to her little projects. Little projects. My entire division, responsible for 40% of our revenue, was reduced to little projects. Carlos, oblivious as always, jumped in. Sarah's great with the detail stuff. Really good at handling the paperwork and keeping track of schedules. Very thorough. The condescension was so casual, so automatic that I don't think he even realized he was doing it. In Carlos's world, I was the family administrator, useful for managing the boring operational stuff while the men handled the real business decisions. As we moved toward the dining room, Dad's phone buzzed again. He checked it immediately, his grin widening even further. Good news? Mom asked, but her voice carried a note of anxiety I'd never heard before. The best news, Dad replied mysteriously. Everything we've been working toward. Isabella caught this exchange and raised her eyebrows at me. She knew something the rest of us didn't. The question was whether she was in on whatever Dad was planning or just picking up on clues the way she'd always been good at reading family moods. We took our traditional seats around the table, Dad at the head, Mom at the foot, Carlos to Dad's right, Isabella to his left, me next to Mom like always. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us. The closer you sat to Roberto Martinez, the more important you were to the Martinez legacy. But tonight, as Mom brought out course after course of perfectly prepared food, I couldn't shake the feeling that our carefully maintained family hierarchy was about to be turned completely upside down. The meal itself was tense, filled with forced conversation and Dad's increasingly obvious excitement. He kept checking his watch, barely touching Mom's famous arroz con pate, while the rest of us made awkward small talk. Finally, as Mom brought out the flan and coffee, Dad stood up and tapped his wine glass with his knife. Family, he announced, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded construction sites for decades. I have something important to share with all of you. The room fell completely silent. Even Isabella put down her phone. As you know, I've dedicated my entire life to building Martinez Construction into something we can all be proud of. For 30 years, I've made every decision with this family's future in mind. He paused, looking around the table at each of us. But tonight, I'm announcing the biggest decision I've ever made. My heart started pounding. This was it. He was finally going to announce the succession plan. Carlos would get the company, Isabella would get some ceremonial role, and I'd probably get a nice severance package and a pat on the head. After months of negotiations, Dad continued, his grin widening, I've accepted an offer to sell Martinez Construction to Southern States Development Corporation for $85 million. The words hit the table like a bomb. Carlos choked on his wine, spraying red liquid across the white tablecloth. What? He gasped, his face going pale. Dad, you can't be serious. Isabella's jaw dropped, her Instagram-perfect composure cracking completely. But what about our family legacy? My entire brand is built around being a Martinez construction heiress. I sat frozen, trying to process what I'd just heard. Sell the company? The business that had defined our family for 3 generations? But Dad wasn't finished. He raised his hand for silence, clearly enjoying the drama he'd created. The sale will be finalized next month, he continued calmly. Your mother and I have decided to use the proceeds to secure our retirement. We're buying a villa in Costa Rica and planning to travel the world. What about us? Carlos demanded, his voice rising with panic. What about our inheritance? You always said the company would be mine someday. Dad's expression hardened. Your inheritance was supposed to be a thriving business that you'd earned through hard work and dedication. But none of you have earned anything. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire. That's not fair, Isabella protested, tears starting to stream down her cheeks. I've worked so hard to promote the company, to build our brand recognition. You've worked hard at taking pretty pictures. Dad cut her off. When was the last time you set foot on an actual construction site? When did you last review a contract, manage a budget, or deal with a difficult client? Carlos slammed his fist on the table, rattling the dishes. I've given 10 years of my life to this company. I've brought in millions in contracts. You've brought in contracts because clients trusted the Martinez name, not because of anything you contributed, Dad replied coldly. Do you think I don't know how you spend your days? Long lunches, golf games, vacation days disguised as business trips. Mom finally spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. Roberto, maybe we should dash. No, Carmen, Dad interrupted. They need to hear this. All of them. He turned back to us, his expression mixing disappointment with determination. For years, I've watched you take advantage of opportunities you never earned. Carlos, you've coasted on my reputation while learning nothing about actual construction. Isabella, you've treated our family business like a prop for your social media career. And Sarah. My heart stopped. Here it comes, I thought. My turn to be dismissed and discarded. Sarah, you're the only one who's tried to contribute something meaningful, but you've never spoken up for yourself. You've let your brothers and sister overshadow you instead of fighting for what you deserve. The unexpected acknowledgement stunned me into silence. The truth is, Dad continued, none of you is ready to run a company. None of you has proven you can build something from nothing, manage real responsibility, or make the hard decisions that business requires. Maybe losing everything you've taken for granted will finally teach you what it means to work for something. Carlos was practically hyperventilating. This is insane, Dad. You're destroying 3 generations of family legacy because you're angry with us? That's not how families work. Families work when everyone contributes, Dad shot back. What have any of you assailed? What have you created that didn't depend on my money, my reputation, my connections? The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella was crying openly now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. Daddy, please. We can change. We can do better. Just give us another chance. But Dad shook his head firmly. The decision is made. The contracts are signed. In 60 days, Martinez Construction will belong to Southern States Development, and the 3 of you will finally have to figure out what you're capable of. That's when I finally found my voice. Wait a minute, I said, my voice cutting through Isabella's sobs and Carlos's panicked breathing. Dad, what's the real reason you're doing this? Everyone turned to look at me. Unlike my siblings, I wasn't crying or shouting. I was thinking, and something about Dad's explanation didn't add up. I told you the reason, Dad replied, but I caught something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty. No, you gave us the emotional reason, I pressed. But Martinez Construction has been profitable every year for the past decade. Our client list is solid, our reputation is excellent, and we have 3 major developments breaking ground next year. Why would you sell a successful business unless you had to? Dad's jaw tightened. Sometimes it's about more than just profit margins, Sarah. Or maybe it's exactly about profit margins, I said, standing up from the table. Dad, are we in financial trouble? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Carlos and Isabella stopped their dramatics, suddenly focused on Dad's response. "The company is fine," Dad said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Then show us the books," I said simply. "If we're being cut out of our inheritance, don't we have the right to know why?" Mom cleared her throat nervously. "Sarah, maybe this isn't the time dash." "Mom, this is exactly the time." I kept my eyes on Dad. Because something doesn't make sense. Southern States Development is our biggest competitor. They've been trying to buy us out for years, and you've always said no. Why now? Why suddenly accept an offer from a company you used to call vultures? Dad's face was turning red, a sure sign I'd hit something important. Carlos, finally catching on, looked between Dad and me. "Wait, Sarah's right. You always said you'd never sell to Southern States. You said they were everything wrong with the construction industry." "People change their minds," Dad said defensively. "Or people run out of options," I countered. "Dad, what aren't you telling us?" The silence stretched until Isabella, surprisingly, spoke up. "Daddy, I've been helping with the social media accounts, remember? I have access to some of the business banking notifications." Her voice was small. "I've seen some of the numbers." Dad's expression went from angry to alarmed. "Isabella, you don't understand business finances dash. I understand when the same account shows big payments going out every month to something called Legal Defense Fund," Isabella interrupted. "And I understand when our main business account has been getting smaller instead of bigger." Now we were getting somewhere. "What Legal Defense Fund?" Carlos demanded, his panic shifting into something sharper. "Dad, are we being sued?" "It's complicated," Dad began, but I cut him off. "No, it's not complicated. Either we're facing legal problems or we're not." I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator app. $85 million minus capital gains taxes, minus your retirement plans. "Dad, how much of that money actually exists after you pay off whatever you've been hiding from us?" The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Mom finally broke her silence. "Roberto, tell them. They deserve to know the truth." Dad slumped back into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. 3 years ago, there was an accident on the Palmetto Bay project. A worker was seriously injured due to faulty scaffolding. My stomach dropped. I remembered that project. I'd been the one pushing for upgraded safety equipment that Dad had deemed unnecessary expense. The worker's family sued. Dad continued quietly. "It should have been covered by insurance, but there were complications with our coverage. The legal fees, the settlement, the ongoing medical costs." He trailed off. "How much?" Carlos asked, his voice barely above a whisper. $12 million over 3 years, Dad admitted. Plus another $8 million in related legal costs and safety upgrades across all our sites. Isabella gasped. $20 million? Daddy, why didn't you tell us? Because I thought I could handle it, Dad said, his authority finally cracking. I thought we could work through it, rebuild the reserves, keep the family business intact. But the legal costs kept growing, and then 2 more families filed related claims and Southern States found out. I finished for him. They knew you were in trouble, so they lowballed an offer knowing you'd have to take it. Dad nodded miserably. They offered $60 million initially. I managed to negotiate up to 85, but after taxes and paying off our debts. He spread his hands helplessly. How much is actually left? Carlos asked. Maybe $15 million, Dad whispered. Enough for your mother and me to retire modestly, but not enough to split between 3 children and still leave them with meaningful inheritance. The room went silent as we all processed this information. Our family fortune, our legacy, our entire identity. It was essentially gone, sacrificed to legal problems that Dad had hidden from us for 3 years. But I was starting to see something my siblings missed. An opportunity hidden in the disaster. I looked around the table at my family. Dad defeated and ashamed, Mom anxiously twisting her napkin, Carlos staring into space as his entire future crumbled, Isabella still crying quietly into her hands. For 31 years, I'd been the overlooked middle child, desperately trying to prove my worth to people who never really saw me. But tonight, everything was different. Dad, I said quietly, what if I told you there was another option? He looked up with tired eyes. Sarah, I know you want to help, but this isn't something that can be fixed with harder work or better organization. The numbers are what they are. What if the numbers could be different? I pressed. What if someone else made an offer? Someone who understood the real value of Martinez Construction, not just the distressed sale price. Carlos let out a bitter laugh. Sarah, who's going to offer more than Southern States? They're getting the company for $30 million under market value because they know Dad's desperate. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would change everything between us forever. I said simply. The confusion on their faces was almost comical. You're what? Isabella asked, wiping her eyes. I'm making a counteroffer, I said, reaching into my purse for the folder I'd brought with me. Yes, I'd actually brought business documents to Thanksgiving dinner. I'm prepared to offer $95 million for Martinez Construction, with better terms than Southern States. Dad stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Sarah, what are you talking about? You don't have $95 million. Actually, Dad, I do. I placed the folder on the table and opened it to reveal financial statements, loan pre-approvals, and business documents that represented 3 years of secret planning. For the past 3 years, while you've been struggling with legal problems, I've been building something of my own, I explained. It started small. Just me, doing independent contracting work on weekends. Custom home renovations, kitchen remodels, bathroom upgrades. The kind of projects that Martinez Construction considered too small to bother with. Carlos leaned forward, squinting at the documents. Sarah, these numbers, this can't be right. It's right, I confirmed. I called it Coastal Custom Homes. I focused on high-end residential work, the kind of projects where clients pay premium prices for personalized attention and perfect craftsmanship. You know, all those skills Grandpa taught me when you two were busy playing instead of learning. I pulled out a tablet and showed them photos of completed projects. I started working nights and weekends, building a client base of people who wanted something special. Word of mouth in the luxury market travels fast when you deliver quality work on time and under budget. Mom's eyes were wide as she scrolled through images of beautiful custom homes, each one bearing the subtle craftsmanship that had been our family trademark for generations. In year 2, I hired 3 employees, I continued. By year 3, I had 15 people working for me and a waiting list of clients. We completed 47 projects last year with an average profit margin of 38%. Dad grabbed the financial statements, his experienced eyes scanning the numbers with growing amazement. Sarah, this shows annual revenue of $12 million? $12.8 million last year, I corrected, with projected growth to $18 million next year. And unlike Martinez Construction, Coastal Custom Homes has 0 debt and excellent insurance coverage. Isabella looked confused. But how do you have $95 million to buy the company? I don't, not in cash, I admitted. But I have something better. I have a business plan that makes sense. 3 years of financial records proving I can run a profitable construction company. And I have backing from investors who believe in what I've built. I pulled out another set of documents. Martinez Private Equity, no relation to our family, just a coincidence, has reviewed my proposal to acquire and merge Martinez Construction with Coastal Custom Homes. They're prepared to provide acquisition financing based on the combined company's projected performance. Dad was still staring at the numbers. You've been doing this in secret for 3 years? Building a competitor to our own family business. Not a competitor, Dad. A compliment. Martinez Construction handles large commercial projects and residential developments. Coastal Custom focuses on individual luxury homes and renovations. Together, we control both ends of the market. The room was silent except for the sound of Dad turning pages, reviewing 3 years of business records he'd never known existed. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not dismissal, not patronizing pride, but genuine respect. You did this, he said quietly. You built something real. The negotiations took 6 weeks, But by New Year's Day, the deal was done. Martinez Construction was officially acquired by Coastal Custom Holdings, the new parent company I'd created to oversee both operations. Dad kept his pride by technically selling to an investment group, but everyone understood that his youngest daughter was now running the family business. The merger was more successful than even my optimistic projections had predicted. Coastal Custom's reputation for quality and attention to detail elevated Martinez Construction's brand, while Martinez's established relationships and larger project capacity gave Coastal Custom room to grow exponentially. Within 3 months, we had landed the biggest contract in company history, a 50-home luxury development that combined Martinez's large-scale expertise with Coastal Custom's high-end finishing work. The profit margins were unlike anything the family business had ever seen. But the real transformation wasn't in the numbers, it was in the family dynamics. Dad struggled initially with his new role as chairman emeritus. After decades of making every decision, consulting on strategy felt like a demotion. But gradually, he began to appreciate having someone else handle the stress and responsibility while he focused on client relationships and mentoring younger employees. He even admitted that he slept better knowing the company was in capable hands. "I never realized how heavy the burden was until someone else picked it up," he told me during one of our weekly strategy meetings. "You've taken on challenges I didn't even know existed." Carlos had the hardest adjustment. Learning that his little sister was now technically his boss required swallowing a lot of pride. For the first month, he barely spoke to me, communicating only through terse emails and avoiding eye contact during meetings. The breakthrough came when I assigned him to lead the marketing effort for our new luxury development. Instead of giving him busy work or sidelining him, I put him in charge of something that matched his actual strengths, schmoozing with high-end clients and presenting our company's vision to investors. "You know what's funny?" Carlos said to me after successfully closing a particularly difficult sale. "I'm good at this job when I understand what I'm supposed to be doing." I restructured his role to focus on client relations and business development, areas where his charisma and networking skills were genuine assets. Within 6 months, he'd brought in more qualified leads than we'd seen in years. Isabella surprised everyone by developing real business acumen once she understood the stakes. Her social media skills translated beautifully into digital marketing and brand management. She created virtual tours of our custom homes that went viral, attracting clients from across the Southeast. More importantly, she started attending construction site meetings and learning the technical aspects of the business. "I got tired of being pretty but useless," she explained. "I want to understand what we're building, not just how to make it look good on Instagram." Mom became my secret weapon during the transition. Her decades of experience managing Dad's moods and navigating family politics made her invaluable in smoothing over conflicts and helping everyone adjust to the new hierarchy. She also had insights into client relationships and company history that proved crucial during the merger process. The most meaningful change was in how we communicated as a family. Our monthly business meetings became actual strategy sessions instead of Dad's monologues. Everyone contributed ideas. Everyone's input was valued, and decisions were made based on expertise rather than family hierarchy. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were heated arguments, hurt feelings, and moments when I wondered if trying to preserve the family business was worth the stress. Carlos and I had several major conflicts over strategy. Isabella occasionally reverted to her princess attitude when asked to do unglamorous work. Dad sometimes forgot he wasn't in charge anymore and tried to override my decisions. But slowly, we found our rhythm. The company that had been built on traditional patriarchal authority evolved into something more collaborative and ultimately more successful. By the end of the first year, Martinez Coastal Custom Holdings had grown to over $30 million in annual revenue. We'd expanded into 3 new markets, hired 50 additional employees, and established ourselves as the premier luxury construction company in South Florida. More importantly, we'd salvaged not just the family business, but the family relationships that had been strained by years of inequality and resentment. The best moment came at our second Thanksgiving after the acquisition. As we sat around the same dining room table where everything had exploded 12 months earlier, Dad raised his glass for a toast. To Sarah, he said, his voice thick with emotion, for saving something I didn't even realize I was losing. Looking back now, 2 years after that explosive Thanksgiving dinner, I realized that the best thing that ever happened to me was being overlooked by my own family. If Dad had handed me a management position based on my gender or birth order, I never would have developed the independence and resourcefulness that allowed me to build something truly my own. Being dismissed forced me to prove myself in ways that inheritance never could. Every client I earned, every project I completed, every employee I hired. All of it was based on merit rather than family connections. When I finally revealed my success to my family, there was no question about whether I'd earned my place at the table. The irony wasn't lost on me that by trying to exclude me from the family business, my father inadvertently created the exact person the family business needed to survive. But here's the thing I want you to understand: if you're watching this and recognizing your family dynamics, building something out of spite isn't enough. Success without reconciliation leaves everyone poorer, including yourself. The real victory came not when I proved my family wrong, but when we found a way to work together as equals. If you're the overlooked middle child, the daughter in a family that only values sons, or the one whose contributions are constantly minimized, I see you. I know what it feels like to have your ideas dismissed, your work attributed to others, or your potential ignored because you don't fit someone else's narrow definition of leadership. But I also want to tell you that their limitations don't define your possibilities. Sometimes the best thing a family can do is underestimate you, because it forces you to develop the strength you didn't know you had. The key is channeling that frustration into something constructive rather than destructive. I could have spent 3 years plotting revenge against my family. Instead, I spent 3 years building something that would ultimately benefit all of us.